Loss of data. We never really think about it because we think that everything is fine, everything is protected. And the reality is, are you absolutely sure that that's the case? Hi, I'm Vin Shemby, the president of WOWzer Technologies, and today I want to talk about my own experience and how that felt. I'll take you back to just a little bit over 7 years ago on July 1st, 2014, Canada Day. You know, I was about to celebrate that. I was actually in the interior in Penticton, and all of a sudden I get a call from my IT person letting me know that my server was down. Okay, I said no problem, because I was actually paying for a company to do a backup of my data. Well, in a very short period of time, I found out something very interesting. No backups were actually being made, even though I was paying for it. And you know, not that long prior to that, I could sense something inside of me, call intuition, call it whatever you want, that something wasn't right and that I should do something. Well, I didn't do that. I allowed the work to get ahead of me as opposed to making sure that everything I had was secure. Imagine that. I don't know how that makes you feel, but I tell you, it made me feel very naked when I found out that my data had been lost, and the biggest data that was lost was my actual accounting data in my accounting files. In a very short period of time, on July 21st, I knew I had a serious problem. Not only that, the people that I entrusted to make the backups of my IT person, all of a sudden, they weren't there for me. And can you imagine that? How does that make you feel? I'll tell you how it made me feel. It made me feel betrayed and alone. That's how it made me feel. Why am I telling you this? Because I want you to think about this. It could actually happen. It's even more of an issue today than it was back then. Way more. Because back then, the cloud was at its inception phase, if you want to call it that. I'm not saying that there weren't conversions already, but the cloud is everywhere today. In my case, I was on a server which I actually paid to have backups made that were not made. But right now on the cloud, your cloud provider is saying they're making backups. But have you read the fine print and see what the limitations are? In my case, did I go and check to make sure there were backups? I did not. And even though I had somebody, my IT person, there was no guideline there for him to check to make sure as well. And that's on me. In a very short period of time, and I mean a very short period of time, I faced multiple lawsuits. Not to mention, I went from a positive cash position to being in debt and lost as well. That's not a great feeling. If I could go back, what is it I would do? I make sure now to think about backups as one of my strategic plans. You don't want to lose your business. Being an accountant or bookkeeper, that's the last thing you want to do, is not knowing where your data is. I don't know about you, but when I went to school, and I know it's the same today, we were taught that we should have our own backups outside of whatever else is being done, that we should have access to it, that no one else has access to it. Guess what? I didn't have that. If I had that, can you imagine how much heartache I could have saved myself? Because that's what it was like. Why am I sharing this with you? I don't want this to be your situation. You know, they talk about wisdom it could be something that's aloof or something that seems almost impossible to reach. But the reality is most wisdom is common sense. And it's common sense for us as accountants and bookkeepers to have our own backups. And to my shame, back then, I'm not ashamed of it anymore, I had to say I did not have one. And I faced one of the most difficult days with 4 of my best clients where I had to tell them I had lost all their data. Now that was not a pleasant day. It was one of the most difficult days of my life. Don't have these kinds of difficult days. But you say, Vince, you know what? You are now, your business is flourishing and it's not where it was before. Well, to my saving grace, one of the things that I did well, actually two things that I actually did was, number one, I had good relationships up until then. If you don't have good relationship with your clients, you could face massive issues when things don't go the way you want them to go, regardless of whether it's a server crash or loss of data. I mean, those are the worst things, of course. And the other thing I had was I was honest about it as well. Those two things were my saving grace that propelled me to where I am today, to be able to stand here and share with you what it felt like. I cannot tell you the excruciating pain that I felt, the betrayal. You know, when I went to the server company and explained to them that they lost my data, all of a sudden the law wall went up. You mean, what's the law wall? All of a sudden it's, I need to go speak to my lawyer. And I'm thinking, what do you mean? I paid you, I have the invoices. That didn't go anywhere. It ended up in court is where it ended up. I don't want you to end up there. Not to mention my IT person, right? And here's another thing that I want you to be very aware of. If you have an IT person, make sure you know who those people are. And I'm not talking about their work skills. I'm talking about them as an individual. Because you can't do all things. If you have one of those individuals, get to know them. Because the one that I had, unfortunately, all of a sudden, now I had to work 3 times longer, and all of a sudden, guess what happens? He pulls the rank on me. Well, hey, if you don't pay this bill, which was 3 times in 3 weeks bigger than his normal monthly bill, I'm not doing anything. This is where I really truly felt alone. I don't know if you can imagine that. Yes, I put my shoes back on, my bootstraps, and I worked around it. Actually, again, my saving grace was what my clients, because I had good relationships, one of them specifically had told me, I don't know how many times, you know, anytime you need my help, let me know. He was one of the individuals I actually called and told him I lost all his data. And because of intuition and my faith, and not wanting to lose everything, that's how desperate I was, I called him up and asked him for his advice. And lo and behold, even though he had gotten the call 3 or 4 days prior, he was a man of his word and said, I will help you. This is why I say honesty in relationships is so important. I hope you never have to experience this kind of situation. I really, truly do. Because it is not fun, okay? I can laugh now, but let me tell you, it was no joke back then. And I think, wow, that was 7 years ago. How fast time flies. But it was over 7 years ago. In closing, what do I want to say to you? Don't leave it in somebody else's hands. Make sure that you have some kind of backup and restore. Even if you're on the cloud, it is your duty, not only to your clients, but to yourself. Because the amount of pain it can cause is immeasurable. It's, you know, I said that back then, I'm going to say it right now. You know what it was like for me? It's as if somebody dropped an atomic bomb inside of my business and exploded, boom! In the blink of an eye, it changed what it looked like. In other words, I didn't recognize anything. I just started from scratch, basically. That's where I was at. In closing, I just want to say to you, don't leave it in somebody's hands. Remember what you were taught at school. What were you taught at school? Make sure you have your own backup somewhere else that nobody can touch. And make sure that you do that on a regular basis. And don't do what I didn't do back then. Check to make sure that they're there, and they, you know what? That you do tests to make sure that your data is backed up and you can restore it if need be. I hope this has helped. And thank you so much. If you have any questions, by all means, please reach out to me. I'm happy to share my thoughts and ideas. And I wish you nothing but a great day. Ciao.